Feel like I was kind of lied to. Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Kat, and I am your Twitch streamer, content creator, big sister, super passionate about helping creators get started and make it a full-time career. And if you're a returning viewer, I love you, I appreciate you, and welcome back to my video. Today's video, we're gonna be talking about how LA has lied to me. Or not really so, I didn't really move to LA with any expectations, but how LA, I guess, was different. There's like a lot of stuff that I learned anyways from moving to LA, so let's get into it. First and foremost, there are a lot of influencer events. A lot. So it was kind of weird. Like, I've always known that influencer events were a thing. Come on, like, I don't live under a rock. I don't think you do either. We all know influencer events are a thing. And I knew that they were a thing in LA because LA is a big creator hub, but I just didn't realize, I guess, how much of it was in LA. I come from the Bay Area, which is, again, very populated, but there are very few creators in the Bay Area, surprisingly. It is definitely a more, like, slightly older millennial generation of techies. There was not very many creators there. So coming down to LA, there's a lot of creators and thus a lot of influencer events that are hosted down in LA. I myself have been invited to some. I went to some events during VidCon, some events at TwitchCon, and then I went to two events outside of that, and it was really eye-opening to see all of that. And back when I was in the Bay Area, I've been invited to a lot of these events, but I never went because obviously I was in the Bay Area, not in LA, so I couldn't go even if I wanted to, and I did want to go, I just couldn't. So it was really interesting. That was definitely an eye-opener and something that I learned about LA. Also, LA was the first time I ever did an influencer event sponsorship, which is a thing. I didn't know that was a thing until I moved out here. But there's sponsorships in which brands will pay influencers to go to these events and then film footage specifically at the event. I've previously done footage promoting events, talking about it and like sharing it with my audience, but the first time I was ever paid to attend of an event was when I moved down to LA. And I was paid to go to an event down in San Diego, which was a 2.5-hour drive away from LA. I thought it was like just 2 hours, hour and a half. Nope, 2.5 hours because it was during traffic. So it was a really eye-opening thing, but it was really cool to attend. Like, I love the experiences that I got from going to these events. Secondly, living in LA is very expensive. I, again, come from the Bay Area, another very expensive place to live in. But LA is also expensive. I feel like it depends. Some parts of LA are more expensive than the Bay, other things are less. But the food here is definitely expensive every time you go out. And a lot of times when you hang out with people, it's like, oh, let's go grab a meal, let's go grab a bite. These dinners go up to like $40, $50 for just a dinner, which I am not used to. And lunch could be like $25, even $30 for a lunch. And that's just getting like one dish and then maybe a drink. So just the food, the living cost in LA is expensive. And then on top of that, the housing cost is expensive. Because I moved down here, so I had to go look for a place to stay. And oh my goodness, either it was affordable, not even, it was just like lower than everywhere else. And it was just in a kind of sketchy place. Like the place wasn't nice. I wouldn't have felt safe living there. Or it was some place that was a nice place that I felt safe living in, but it was very expensive. It was one or the other. And going into that, point number 3, living in LA is so overglorified, I feel like. I was talking to my friend Lily today about this, and she was like, yeah, ever since I moved down to LA, people have been like, oh, you're in LA, so that means you've made it. And she was like, no, I don't feel like I've made it at all. And I completely agree with what she said. I feel like moving to LA is the pinnacle of, oh, you've made it, you are at the peak of your career. But little do you know, everyone in LA is just struggling to make ends meet. It may look like on the outside and maybe on social media that we're doing big, cool things, but behind the scenes, because the cost of living here is so high, but the wage for jobs is barely higher than the average, well, California average, let's say. I'm from California. Overall, everyone that I know is kind of just scraping by. Places are really expensive, the cost of living is really high, and they can just barely afford to go out and pay their rent, and that's about it. And most creators down here live that way. But from the outside, it seems so glamorous, and it's like, wow, you've made it, you're doing so much. Most of us are kind of broke. Little do you know. Also, so many content creators live here. And not just content creators, but people that work in industries. Like, a lot of esports people are in LA. Most esports players are in LA. So it's just kind of interesting because as you're walking casually on the street, you can just run into people. Like, I've ran into so many pro league players just on the street because everyone's here. And I go to these influencer events, and a lot of these big influencers that I know are in LA, and so they're at these events. And in general, a lot of my creator influencer friends are in LA. I felt like most of my friends were actually in LA, like my creator friends, that is, and very few were in the Bay. And again, like, as somebody from the Bay is a very populated place, but very few creators, interestingly, are from there. Also, the last one, 0.6, I knew about this, or 0.5. You have to drive everywhere, like literally everywhere. And parking is expensive too. If you go out, a night out, you can expect to pay $20 for parking. It's so expensive. Most people who are in LA, when they're like, oh, let's hang out, a lot of people are actually not from the LA area, but they're from like Orange County, which is about an hour drive south, which is a very residential place in LA, like a very residential county. Most people are from there. So if you do want to hang out with a lot of people, even though people will say they're in LA just to, because geographically it makes a little more sense, they might actually be an hour away. Influencer events might be an hour away from you, and you're gonna have to drive there because otherwise you're gonna pay like $70 for an Uber. But even if you drive around, like, the parking is so expensive. It's like $12, $15, $20 for parking every single time you go out. And a lot of these events and things like that do involve you driving out, or even like creator meetup, stuff like that. So at every single event and hangout, you end up shelling out way more money than you want to, even if you didn't intend to, simply because of just the cost of the meal and driving out and things like that. It gets expensive real fast. But overall, I do really enjoy being in LA. I like the culture down here. I like how it's very like surrounded by influencers. It is designed for creators. There's so many creator opportunities down here that I didn't expect. It felt like once I moved down, a lot of doors opened up for me in the creator space that I didn't even know was an option when I was in the Bay Area, simply because there's just very few creators there. So while I do enjoy moving out and I do enjoy living out here, again, like I had said in this video, these were all a bunch of culture shocks to me because I didn't expect that coming down here. So comment down below if you're thinking of moving down to LA. Really curious, would love to know. Also, I do have to say the Boba Bay area is better. If you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I also have a Ko-fi in which I have free resources for streamers and content creators, and an Etsy in which I sell overlays and emotes, anything you can want for your streams. I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. PST. So I hope to catch you guys there or in another video. Peace.